Thank you, Madam Deputy President. As a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia, I note that this is a real David and Goliath battle that Senator O'Neill has taken on, and she's taken it on well. I point to one corner, we have General Motors, one of the world's largest corporations, ruthlessly abandoning its franchisees in this country, doing it without any consideration, and the government stood by and watched. Families that have put their businesses together over decades, blood, sweat and tears, lots of hard work. Small to medium businesses ploughed so much work into their businesses as well. And what do we see? Just divested by General Motors, tossed aside on the scrap heap. And the government delayed. It promised to address this issue, but has still failed to do so. No wonder people are feeling concerned, afraid, vulnerable, very worried at the hands of large multinational companies with huge imbalances of power. General Motors is treating their franchisees, the Holden dealers, right across this country, Holden dealers, small businesses often, with decades of history, treating them like dirt. Now we have Mercedes lining up to do the same, and Honda and Renault. Honda, a company that has worked so admirably around the world with its dealers, now looking to quit its dealer network as well. These companies stealing databases that have been built up over decades. Queensland rural dealerships. I mean, look at our country, look at our state rather, it's the most decentralised of any. It's the only state with more people in the rural areas than in the city, than in the capital city. And those dealer networks need support. But it's not just car dealers, it's also boat dealers, marine dealers, water sport dealers, motorbike dealers, and it's not just wheel dealers, it's people with small business franchises right across this country. And what they're needing is support. They're needing fairness, and they're needing support for locals, for small business. They're needing some security, some certainty. 60,000 workers in this sector alone, in the auto sector alone, according to Senator O'Neill, and that includes many, many tradesmen, many apprentices, good people, local community businesses. And I want to commend Senator O'Neill, because Senator O'Neill came to us to explain her bill. She asked for our support. She did her research. She was willing to answer questions, be on call at any time just to answer her questions and put her staff on call to us. I acknowledge that, through you, Deputy Chair, to Senator O'Neill. I appreciate it and I endorse her work. She works, and if Labor senators had the same enthusiasm in general as Senator O'Neill, then we'd be able to work with them much, much better. We commend Senator O'Neill for the way in which she has done so, and she came to us just freely offering us her bill. Senator O'Neill, sadly, is one of the very few real Labor senators in this parliament. I know at least 20% of Labor senators are upset with the way Labor has turned against workers, abandoned workers in favour of woke policies supporting the globalist agenda. Look at things like taxation policy. Look at things like energy policy, destroying manufacturing. And the Liberals and Nationals are similar. They're just a matter of grades apart. But the Labor Party's policies and the Liberal National policies are abandoning manufacturing. They're swallowing the UN dictates, the UN Kyoto Protocol, the UN Paris Agreement, which is not really an agreement, and going back to 1975, the UN's Lima Declaration, the UN Kyoto Protocol, UN Paris Agreement, Lima Declaration, all selling out manufacturing, selling out to some extent all industry, including agriculture. And what about the free trade agreements, so-called free trade agreements? We want instead fair trade agreements. Labor's support for free trade agreements means that they're selling out workers and Australian employers, small and large. Tax policies, as I said, that let foreign multinationals off the hook. Labor Party in Bob Hawke's era as Prime Minister let them off the hook with petroleum rent resources tax. And yet a few Labor senators stand up for workers, but sadly they're in the very small minority. And when I look at immigration, look at pay rates that are stagnant, because of rising immigration until COVID. And with rising costs and stagnant pay, it means living standards are falling. Look at the shortage, look at the oversupply of workers so that we've got a shortage of jobs. Sorry, an abundance of jobs and a shortage of an oversupply of workers, so I beg your pardon, oversupply of workers that are driving wage rates down. Look at the pressure on housing, driving housing prices up. Look at the pressure on infrastructure in this country because the Labor is tied to this large country policy, let in many, many immigrants, far more than we need. Look at the gender bending, the school indoctrination and the trendy virtue signalling that is taking over the Labor Party. And we have good senators like Senators Stirl, Farrell, Gallagher, Sheldon and others. Great to work with. They support workers. They're honest people. And yet they are saddened that the Labor Party has abandoned them. The Labor Party has swamped them in woke policies. So while Senator O'Neill supports real Australian businesses, her party has largely abandoned workers. Look at the energy sector. Coal tossed on the scrap heap by Labor's virtue signallers. Look at industrial relations, where Mr Joel Fitzgibbon abandoned and neglected the abused and exploited workers in the Hunter Valley, workers that I had to come in and support from Queensland with Stuart Bonds our candidate in the Hunter. Selling out our sovereignty to the UN globalists. These are the things that Labor now stands for. And as Senator O'Neill has showed her leadership in coming to work with all the parties on the crossbench and the Greens, as Senator Whish-Wilson has complimented her, and rightly so, we would expect that Labor would have a reasonable accommodation in play. We would reasonably expect that Labor Party would have an attitude that would be more favourable to Senator Hanson's bill to get foreign companies to pay tax on petroleum resources. Yet Labor denied support to our bill. And when we asked them why, just a blank stare. Nothing, no reason, no justification. So I will finish with this, talking about this bill by emphasising the two major benefits. It brings compulsory arbitration to rectify the imbalance between those who have enormous power like General Motors and the franchisees who have limited power. And the massive increase in penalties, all justified to restore some balance in power. However, the Australian Financial Review rightly said today that this is just a plugging the hole in the dike. Labor has lost its way in policy. Labor has lost its way in our Senate. But One Nation will reiterate again that we will support all parties, yet we expect parties to work with us and to give us a fair go. I support this bill. And I thank Senator O'Neill again for her leadership in reaching out to me in my office. We will work happily with Senator O'Neill, and I remind the Labor Party that if they ever get back into power, they will need to work with us. They will need to work with us. And we will be happy to work with people like Senator O'Neill, Senator Farrell, Senator Stirl, Senator Gallagher, Senator Sheldon. These are the people, sadly they're in a minority, but we will happily work with Senator O'Neill and her like.